readers, have you ever had a time when you're talking to somebody or somebody's talking to you, and then all of a sudden you realize that you're not paying attention anymore? And that's the moment where you have to say, stop. I need to pay attention and focus on the conversation that I'm having with this person. Now, that's exactly what good readers do as they're reading and catch if their attention is drifting. Good readers have to tell themselves, you know what, I've got to stop and I've got to pay attention and focus on exactly what I'm reading. So the last strategy that we're going to talk about today and tomorrow is all about working on our reading focus. And the strategy we're going to work on today and tomorrow is called Retell and Jump Back In. So let's look at it right over here for 1 second. Remember, that's what good readers do, is they kind of bring their attention back, and then they focus on what they're reading. Because the better you get at doing that, and the more times you practice these strategies, the better and stronger reader you'll become. So our reading focus for today is I can self-select, read independently, and comprehend literature at grade level. So our retell and jump back in strategy looks a little bit like this. So I wrote, sometimes our mind can wander. If it wanders, say stop. I'm not going to think about that right now. So you really have to remind yourself and tell yourself to stop. Sometimes, you know what I even do is I say stop out loud to myself. And it may sound funny. Someone in the other room might say, well, what are you doing talking to yourself? But sometimes we almost need it to come out of our mouths to remind ourselves that we need to stop and refocus to what we're doing. And it's okay to do that as a reader, as a third grader. And then you can explain to somebody in your family what strategy you're using and how you're using it and why you're using it too. So anyways, we'll say stop. I'm not going to think about that right now. Then the first thing we're going to work at is retell. So retell to yourself what was going on in the story beforehand. Then you say back out loud of your mouth what you remember. Because sometimes if we have practice saying things out loud, it'll be easier for us to remember later on. Then you go back to the part that seems a little fuzzy and you're rereading that. So the book I'm going to show you how to practice with today and tomorrow is called Fritz and the Mess Fairy. It's an older book by one of my favorite authors, Rosemary Wells, but I think it's kind of a fun book to read and a fun book to work on the retell and jumping back in strategy with. Okay, so here we go. Fritz and the Mess Fairy. So here's Fritz. Have you cleaned up your room yet, Fritz? Asked Fritz's mother. I will, shouted Fritz. It's a huge mess. Fritz stuffed a month's laundry, 12 heaps of old Halloween candy, half a dozen wet towels, 6 silver ice cream spoons, and stuck to 6 dessert plates, 3 library books with popsicle stick bookmarks, and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, all under his bed. Supper time, yelled Fritz's sister Tiffany. Fritz asked Fritz's mother, have you seen my silver ice cream spoons? Somebody must have taken them, said Fritz. Not me, said Tiffany. I don't eat ice cream. Drink your milk, Fritz, says Fritz's father. Fritz put a dab of relish in his milk so it would turn a weird color. Something's wrong with it, said Fritz. Everybody had finished eating and left the table by the time Fritz had removed all the raisins from his toast, separated all the peas out of his soup, and slipped most of his potatoes under his seat cushion. It's your turn to do the dishes tonight, Fritz, said Fritz's mother. I will, said Fritz. But just as Fritz was about to start washing up, he remembered his science fair project was due the very next day. Quickly, Fritz chose an experiment from the back of the book. It required a raw egg, a feather, copper wire, rosewater glycerin, and a junior rocket booster. Fritz assembled everything but the rosewater, which was on Tiffany's vanity table. So as soon as Tiffany went to her room with her friends, Fritz tiptoed up into her room to borrow just a little bit. So you can see it's all neat right here, and then when he leaves it, it's a big mess. You know what? I can tell that I'm not paying attention, so I need to stop, and I need to think to myself, I'm not going to think about that right now. I was wondering what my kids are doing right this minute, and I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to think about that right now. So I'm going to retell a little bit that happened in the story. I can see that Fritz has some trouble with cleaning up, and that then he remembers that he remembers that there's a science fair project, and he's getting all these different materials, and he goes into his sister's room and makes a bigger mess. So Now I'm going to go back to the part that was kind of fuzzy, which was down here when he's getting his other materials for his science fair project. So Fritz assembled everything but the rose water, which was on Tiffany's vanity table. As soon as Tiffany went out with her friends, Fritz tiptoed in her room to borrow just a little bit. But Fritz could not get the science experiment to work. He tried again and again, using ever more eggs, coils of copper wire, a bolster full of feathers, and nearly the whole bottle of rose water glycerin. Suddenly his bedroom door opened. "Your name is mud in my book, son," grumbled his father. "My copper wire's all gone, and my toolbox is a mess." I really like that "your name is mud in my book, son," because that is actually an idiom. So it means different from what it sounds. So it doesn't mean that his name is actually mud, like wet dirt. It means that he's really in trouble, is what when your name is mud. "Your name is mud in my book, son," grumbled his father. "My copper wire's all gone and my toolbox is a mess." "Fritz," intoned his mother, "the kitchen is a shambles because of you." Tiffany squealed. "You're in hot water with me, bird brain." "I didn't do it," yelled Fritz, and he slammed his door and threw all his trucks out the window into the flower garden. Fritz was too sleepy to clean up. Outside his window, the night air stirred softly through the willow branches. Moonlight slid between the shadows, and an owl flew over. But as the hours passed and midnight went on, something strange began taking place in the beaker on the floor of Fritz's room. Okay, so we're going to stop there for right now. Today, when you're reading, I really want you to try and practice the retell and jump back in strategy when you have trouble paying attention. It's actually really helpful if you have somebody maybe who's reading next to you, if you can say stop and then go back and practice with them. So if you have a chance today to do that, even with a younger or older sibling, or with somebody in your pod, or with somebody in your family, or even if you have a pet that's just around and you want to retell part of the story to them to be able to jump back into your book, that's a great way to practice. Have a fantastic day, third graders.